Here we are in the chapter of New Successes and Challenges. You can see a picture of Malcolm X at the top. Why it matters. During the 1950s and 1960s, the civil rights movement made great strides forward, yet racial injustice was not fully eradicated. Frustration with this situation led some African Americans to turn to more radical and sometimes violent methods. African Americans achieved further successes, but for some, the radicalism of the times left a bitter legacy. Section Focus Question. What successes and challenges face the civil rights movement after 1964? The push for voting rights. None of the federal court decisions or civil rights measures passed through 1964 fundamentally affected the right to vote. The problem was a Southern political system that used literacy tests, poll taxes, and intimidation to keep blacks from voting. In Mississippi in 1964, for instance, not a single African American person was registered to vote in 5 counties that had African American majorities. All of the major civil rights organizations sought to overcome these political injustices. SNCC stages Freedom Summer. SNCC, or SNCC, had spent several years organizing voter education projects in Mississippi and met with little success and a great deal of violent opposition. But in 1964, it called for a major campaign known as Freedom Summer. About 1,000 volunteers, mostly black and white students, were to flood Mississippi. They would focus on registering African Americans to vote. They would also form the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, the MFDP, an alternative to the state's all-white regular Democratic Party. Even before most of the volunteers had arrived, 3 civil rights workers, Michael Schwerner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman, disappeared. SNCC claimed that they were murdered. State authorities denied these charges. President Johnson ordered a massive search for the 3, which ended when their bodies were found buried in an earthen dam. All had been shot at point-blank range. Yet, despite the obvious dangers, almost all of the other volunteers remained in the state. After Freedom Summer ended in August 1964, an MFDP delegation traveled to the Democratic Convention in New Jersey, seeking to be recognized as Mississippi's only Democratic Party. At the convention, Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the MFDP's leaders, gave powerful testimony. She described how she and other activists had been beaten, fired from their jobs, and displaced from their homes, all because, as she put it, they wanted to register and live as decent human beings. Despite Hamer's testimony, the Democrats refused to seat the MFDP. Instead, party officials offered a compromise. They would seat 2 MFDP members as at-large delegates and reform the nomination rules to guarantee greater minority representation in the future. The MFDP rejected this offer. Ironically, Mississippi's regular Democratic delegation left the convention in protest because the National Party had made the offer to the MFDP. Marching on Selma. Early in 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. and the SCLC organized a major campaign in Selma, Alabama to pressure the federal government to enact voting rights legislation. The protests climaxed in a series of confrontations on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on the main route from Selma to Montgomery. The first of these confrontations took place on March 7, 1965, a day that became known as Bloody Sunday. Heavily armed state troopers and other authorities attacked the marchers as they tried to cross the bridge. Cheyenne Webb, a 6-year-old girl at the time, recalled the scene. "I heard all of this screaming and somebody yelled, 'Oh God, they're killing us!' And I looked and I saw the troopers charging us, swinging their arms and throwing canisters of tear gas. Some of them had clubs and others had ropes and whips. It was like a nightmare. I just knew then that I was going to die." Webb survived, but the rampage continued. Television coverage of the violence outraged the nation. On March 15th, President Johnson went on national television and called for a strong federal voting rights law. Historically, regulation of voting rights had been left to the states, but Johnson argued that it is wrong to deny any of your fellow citizens the right to vote. He added, "Their cause is our cause too, because it is not just Negroes, but really it is all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome." New legislation guarantees voting rights. Spurred by the actions of protesters and the words of the president, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The act banned literacy tests and empowered the federal government to oversee voting registration and elections in states that had discriminated against minorities. In 1975, Congress extended coverage to Hispanic voters in the Southwest. Another legal landmark was the 24th Amendment to the Constitution ratified in 1964. It banned the poll tax, which had been used to keep poor African Americans from voting. In addition, the federal courts handed down several important decisions. Baker v. Carr and Reynolds v. Sims limited racial gerrymandering, the practice of drawing election districts in such a way as to dilute the African American vote, and established the legal principle of one man, one vote. These laws and decisions had a profound impact. Particularly in the Deep South, African American participation in politics skyrocketed. In Mississippi, the percentage of African Americans registered to vote jumped from just under 7% in 1964 to about 70% in 1986. Nationwide, the number of African Americans elected officials rose from fewer than 100 to more than 6,000 by the mid-1980s. Frustration explodes into violence. Many celebrated the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, yet for some African Americans, things had not changed much. In many urban areas, there was anger and frustration over continuing discrimination and poverty. That anger exploded into violence in several cities. Racial violence plagues cities. Less than a week after Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, one of the worst race riots in American history erupted in the predominantly African American neighborhood of Watts in Los Angeles. Violence, looting, and arson spread for several days before National Guard troops restored order. Watts was one of many race riots that erupted in the 1960s. The worst violence occurred in Newark, New Jersey, and Detroit, Michigan in the summer of 1967. In Detroit, 43 people died, and property damage reached $50 million. The outburst frightened many white Americans. In most previous race riots, whiteheads used violence to keep African Americans in their place. But now, blacks were using violence against police and white business owners in black neighborhoods. The Kerner Commission seeks the cause. To determine the causes of the riots, President Johnson established the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, known as the Kerner Commission. It concluded that long-term racial discrimination stood as the single most important cause of violence. The Commission also recommended establishing and expanding federal programs aimed at overcoming the problems of Americans' urban ghettos. Our nation is moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. Segregation and poverty have created the racial ghetto and a destructive environment totally unknown to most Americans. From the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders in their report in 1967. The Kerner Commission's finding proved highly controversial. A number of conservative commentators argued against expanding federal spending. They said that this amounted to rewarding the rioters. Others noted that the black-white split in the report described ignored other minorities. President Johnson did not follow up on the Commission's recommendations, largely because the Vietnam War was consuming enormous sums of federal money. The riots also fueled a white backlash. Many whites opposed further reforms. New voices for African Americans. The racial rioting in the mid-1960s coincided with the radicalization of many African Americans, particularly young urban African Americans. Rather than advocating nonviolence and integration, they called for another approach. Malcolm X offers a different vision. The most well-known African American radical was Malcolm X, who was born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska in 1925. He adopted the X to represent his lost African name. Little, he argued, was his slave name. Malcolm had a difficult childhood. In his teens, he moved to Boston and then to New York City, where he became involved in drugs and crime and landed in prison on burglary charges at age 21. While in prison, Malcolm became a convert to the Nation of Islam, a religious sect headed by Elijah Muhammad. The group prescribed strict rules of behavior, including no drugs or alcohol, and demanded a separation of the races. After his release from prison, Malcolm became the Nation of Islam's most prominent minister. In 1964, however, he broke away from the Nation of Islam and formed his own organization. He then made a pilgrimage to Mecca, the holy city of Islam. Returning to the U.S., he seemed willing to consider limited acceptance of whites. In February 1965, however, Malcolm X was shot and killed. 3 members of the Nation of Islam were convicted of the murder. Young leaders call for black power. Many young African Americans saw themselves as heirs of the radical Malcolm X. They began to move away from the principles of nonviolence. They also began to question the goal of integration. As SNCC leader Stokely Carmichael put it, integration has been based on complete acceptance of the fact that in order to have a decent house or education, blacks must move into a white neighborhood or send their children to all-white schools. This reinforces the notion that white is automatically better and black is by definition inferior. Carmichael first used the term Black Power in 1966. In that year, James Meredith had set off on a march against fear across the state of Mississippi to encourage African Americans to register and vote. Meredith traveled only 20 miles before he was shot and left for dead by a white supremacist. SNCC Corps and the SCLC members vowed to continue the march. When they reached Greenwood, Mississippi, Carmichael and some other marchers were arrested. After his release, Carmichael told a crowd that African Americans needed Black Power. He later said that Black Power meant African Americans should collectively use their economic and political muscle to gain equality. Yet, many white Americans felt threatened. They believed that Black Power meant black violence. Militants formed the Black Panthers. Not long after Carmichael's Black Power speech, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale formed the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California. Almost overnight, the Black Panthers became a symbol of young and militant African Americans. The Black Panthers organized armed patrols of urban neighborhoods to protect people from police abuse. They also created anti-poverty programs such as free breakfasts for poor African American children. The Black Panthers gained national attention when they entered the state Capitol in Sacramento, carrying shotguns and wearing black leather jackets and berets to protest attempts to restrict their rights to bear arms. The Panther style appealed to many young African Americans who began to wear their hair in afros and to refer themselves as black rather than Negro or colored. Some, following the lead of Malcolm X, changed their names and celebrated their African heritage. At the same time, the Panthers' militancy often led to violent confrontations with police. Each side accused the other of instigating the violence. Martin Luther King's final days. Martin Luther King understood the anger and frustration of many urban African Americans whose lives had changed little despite the civil rights reforms of the 1960s. However, he disagreed with the call for Black Power and sought a nonviolent alternative to combat economic injustice. After spending about a year in Chicago's slums to protest conditions there, King made plans for a massive Poor People's Campaign. The campaign's goal was to pressure the nation to do more to address the needs of the poor. As part of this effort, King journeyed to Memphis, Tennessee in early April 1968. There, he offered his assistance to sanitation workers who were striking for better wages and working conditions. On April 3rd, King addressed his followers. He referred to threats that had been made against his life. "Like anybody, I would like to live a long life," King declared. "But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will." The following day, as King stood on the balcony outside of his motel room, he was struck by a shot from a high-powered rifle. He died at the hospital shortly afterwards at the age of 39. James Earl Ray, a white ex-convict, was later charged with King's murder. Robert F. Kennedy was campaigning for the presidency in Indianapolis when he heard of King's death. RFK stopped his campaign speech to give the audience the sad news. He reminded them that he had lost his own brother to an assassin's bullet. Kennedy asked those assembled to honor King's memory by replacing their anger and desire for revenge with an effort to understand with compassion and love. Despite Kennedy's pleas, riots broke out in hundreds of cities after King's assassination. 2 months later, Robert Kennedy's life, too, was cut short by an assassin. Significant gains and controversial issues. King's assassination marked an important turning point. The protests for Black freedom and racial equality that began in the mid-1950s crested into the late 1960s around the time of King's death. By then, the civil rights movement had made significant gains. Yet, white racism and the social and economic gap between many Black and whites remain. New measures aimed at closing this gap tended to provoke more controversy than consensus in America. Civil rights are advanced. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s succeeded in eliminating legal and de jure segregation and knocking down barriers to African American voting and political participation. During the same period, African American poverty rates fell, and the median income of African American men and women rose rapidly, as did the number of African Americans who graduated from high school. One symbol of the progress that had been made was the appointment of Thurgood Marshall as the first African American Supreme Court Justice in 1967. The following year, in the wake of King's murder, Congress passed one final civil rights measure, the Fair Housing Act, which banned discrimination in housing. Attempts to increase the economic opportunities for African Americans and to integrate neighborhood schools encountered more difficulties. To achieve desegregated schools, the federal courts had ordered the use of forced busing. Richard Nixon, who succeeded Lyndon Johnson as president, criticized busing as a means of achieving racial balance. Affirmative action proved controversial almost from the start. Some whites argued that it constituted reverse discrimination and violated the goal of creating a colorblind society. Until the nation addressed the legacy of this unequal treatment, Marshall asserted it would not fulfill its promise of providing equal rights and opportunities to all. This debate or controversy, as you will see in future chapters, remains unresolved.